So today I have Lauree with me to do a budgeting call. So Lauree, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So Lauree and I, before I started recording, were saying that we've seen each other's names and messaged back and forth on Instagram and things. So there's already a familiarity, but this is our first face-to-face call. Lauree, I'd love to hear before we jump into the call, what made you sign up for something like this? Have you budgeted in other apps or things and you want to just try something different? Or do you have a really specific financial goal that you want to achieve? What made you be like, yeah, this is for me?
So I budget for a living and do
Okay.
accounting, but I don't have my own.
Hmm.
And it's been really frustrating for me to not feel like my finances are in control. I've thought about some other apps and I've maybe downloaded them and started. And then I'm like, God, this is hard. Why
Hmm.
is this hard for me? I should understand how to do this. So for a while, I've been thinking I need to do something. And I saw your stuff and it just felt, I understood it. It felt a little bit more easier and doable. I need
Hmm.
something that I'm going to stick with. And I love Excel. And so
Yeah.
the fact that this was in Excel actually was a big part of it because that's
Okay.
what works for me. So yeah, my
Awesome.
main goal
Yeah.
was to get out of debt and be
Yep.
organized in my
Yes.
finances.
You're not the first accountant that I've talked to. And there's this huge like guilt that they carry. They're like, this should be easy for me. This should be something that clicks for me. And when I first met with my first CPA for my business, he said the same thing. He was like, oh my gosh, it's almost embarrassing that like this isn't, when he asked me what business I have or whatever. And I told him, I'm like, I know they sound like they overlap, but in the same way that I understand almost nothing about taxes, it makes
Great.
sense that you would understand almost nothing about personal budgeting. I think there's a sense that there's more overlap than there actually is.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. The
Yeah.
embarrassment for sure is like what probably has held me back for a long time too from like trying to figure out a resource. So
Right. Because
yeah.
you're like, oh, I'm a CPA. This is what I do,
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
not, it's just really different because I think when if you're a CPA for like taxes or for a company or whatever, it's not your money. Like there's no emotional tie
Right.
to it at all. And so as soon as you throw that in, it's not just numbers, it's not just a spreadsheet, it's your actual life. Like that is
Uh,
enough of a curveball that it just throws a wrench in everything that you know and have trained for.
yeah, absolutely.
So you're not alone. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm the only accountant that is like this. Not at all.
Oh, good. Not breaking the mold.
No, you're not. You're not. So I'm going to share my screen with you so that we can see what we have on the left and what we have on the right. So on the left, you have filled out the worksheet that I have everybody fill out, which is, I call it a finance snapshot. And it's just a summary of pretty much all the numbers that we need in order to build an accurate, realistic budget. So it's broken down into groups. First, we have income. So you have several different streams of income coming in at different times of the month, different sizes, some variable, some not variable. So we have all those written down together. And then all expenses, which a lot of times the mistake people make when they're making a budget is that they make a list of bills. And then basically, as long as the income minus the bills has a surplus, then they're like, okay, that surplus is what I'll live off of. But what we
Mhm.
have here is that we want to include bills and spending. So any sort of spontaneous spending or variable spending, our food, our shopping, our toiletries, all of those things, vacation, holidays. So we have all of those collected here. And then the last thing we compile is how much do we have in savings versus how much do we want to have in savings? So for you, like you had said, an ideal emergency fund would be 10,500. I'm curious, how'd you come up with that number?
I just looked at my bank activity. I downloaded it for 4 months and I looked at an average ish, like taking out some of the big weird things.
Mhm.
And it was about 3,500. And then I was like, well, for 3 months. And so, I mean, really, it should probably be like twice as much, I guess, for six
Yeah.
months potentially. But I'm like, let's just start with three.
Yes, that's a perfect way to do it because what I tell people is like the first thing to start with is about a month of expenses. And so we'll look at I do a little bit lower than that where I say a month of necessary expenses. So once we fill out the
Okay.
budget, I'll highlight anything that we would count as necessary where we'll say, hey,
Okay.
even if we lost our income, we would continue to pay for these things. And
Okay.
that's where we arrive at that 1 month. So you're just guessing, off of that number. It'll probably be like 8,000
Okay.
ish, but we can look at that. But that's the way you did it.
Okay.
It's the ideal way to start out. So that was a great line of thinking. And then the last thing we'll do is look at debt. And we always pay minimums on debt. But what we'll look at ideally is having a gap between income and spending in order to target two goals. Main goal of
Right.
building that emergency fund, and then also paying down specifically high interest debt, which is debt with a 10% interest rate or higher, which for you would be all of them. So we'll put those in order once we build the budget.
Okay.
Now, with that in mind, and this 30-day kind of summary on the left, what we're then going to do as we move our numbers from the left to the right is we're translating this holistic summary on the snapshot into a specific budget by pay period. And a pay period means anything to anyone. It looks very different for lots of different people. For you, because you have lots of smaller incomes and then one main income, we budget by the main primary income, and then we will fill in all the other incomes wherever they'll fall into that primary income schedule. So you have a twice a month schedule, which is also what I currently budget on. So that means that your income comes always on the same 2 dates of the month, and that your bills are grouped together because bills that have a set due date are always going to fall, in this group A and group B, basically. So the con of that, so that's a pro of having a twice a month pay schedule, is same 2 dates of the month. The bills that fall together pretty much always fall together. So you have a much more even pattern to your budget than someone who's paid like weekly or biweekly. The
Right.
downside of that is that the pay periods themselves can be different lengths of time. So what happens with that is, like, I just had this happen last week. I have a once a week babysitter and I pay her every Tuesday. So I budgeted to pay her 2 times per pay period. But
Mhm.
I'm paid twice a month. So every once in a while, there's actually going to be 3 Tuesdays in a pay period instead of 2. And I
Right.
realized in the middle of the pay period that I actually needed to budget to pay her 3 times instead of 2. So those are the kind of things, those are the traps that we fall into when we have a twice a month pay schedule. So we're going to go ahead across the top and fill out the dates here for the pay periods. And what I do is not just list your payday, but I actually list the whole range from payday until the day before you're paid again, so that it makes it a lot easier as we're filling out the rest of the budget to just peek at the top and say, okay, anything that we have to pay for inside this range needs to be included in this column. So that would look like we'll have July 15th to 30th, and then July 31st to August 14th, August 15th to 30th, August 31st to September 14th, September 15th to 29th, and then September 30th to October 14th. So even though it's a little bit tedious and repetitive to fill it out this way, the advantage is that we're going to finish our time together with a budget that's specifically broken down by pay period and filled out all the way through mid-October. So you get more bang for your buck. Like, in one sit down of budgeting, by the time that you fill it out, you have across 3 months worth of a very specific schedule. So
Mm.
now it's time to fill in the budget or the income here. So I'm going to duplicate a few lines here just so that we have enough rows for all of your income. And then I'm going to paste this over here so that we have your little shorthand so that we know which one we are working with. So as we fill out the incomes, we're going to do a couple things. Your primary income that we just built the schedule on obviously is going to be every single pay period. You also listed that that is not a variable income. So that's a good thing, because that means that we can plan on $2,270 coming at the very start of every single one of these pay periods we see here. Now, once we move into other incomes that might be on a different schedule or might be more variable, we have to take just a little bit more time to make sure we're accurately mapping out, are we actually going to get paid for that income in this pay schedule? So let's look at your next one. Is paid on the same schedule, but it is variable between 300 and 400. So you wrote it out perfectly here with this 300, that we'll just plan for the lower side because it's much easier to get paid a little bit more than you thought than to get paid less than you thought. So we'll carry that 300 all the way over. And then for income 3, it's, let's see, is it 5th and 15th always? Oh no, it's once a
No.
5th. Okay.
Oh, did I put?
Yep, that's okay. It was just one typo. It's fine. Fifth of the month. You have two that are fifth of the month, and they're both variable. So we'll plan for the lower side. I think the 500 and the 50 are great. So we'll do fifth and fifth. So that we'll just look across here and we'll have 550, and we'll just copy those and paste them in each pay period that includes the fifth. And then we've got the 15th, which is not variable. And that's really nice too, that comes also on payday from your main income, because that means that we'll start with that money at the start of the pay period, which is ideal. And then this one is on the 11th. And then is it every other week or, oh, it's quarterly?
That one is every quarter.
Okay.
Yeah, but it falls on a weird, we can like this one, December is always, it's always December, even though really the next quarter after October should be January, but either way.
Okay. So do you have one in July then?
I just had one.
You already had it. Okay.
Yep.
So it's like April, July, October, and December.
Yep.
April, July, October, and December. Okay.
Yep.
So I'll just list that out there for those months, but I won't include any. Oh, you will get paid October 1st. I forgot that we're all looking at October, and I'll put 300 there. Okay. So this now is essentially a calendar of your income. This top section here, we can see how it's broken down into half month increments, and then each income is mapped out where it will fall. So one of the nice things about doing it this way is that this looks pretty different from other budgeting apps. The way they would function with income, they would ask you to essentially just put all of your monthly income in one number, and it would go as available in July. Even though as we look at it this way in more of a calendar view, we can see that a lot of the pay periods end up being different than each other, certainly in an alternating pattern. And then we also have the ability to add in these less frequent incomes, like a quarterly one, with specific dates in mind, as opposed to having to average it out or treat every month as the same and things like that. We're working with a total of 19,485 in income across all 6 pay periods. So this number won't change even as we include expenses in the budget, but these two will change because they are functions of what is the difference between your income and your expenses. So these bold numbers here are taking all income from the top of the pay period and subtracting all expenses below to constantly update us with how much of the income that you'll receive in that pay period is still available to put towards other things. So as we map out your expenses in the same way that we just did your income, we'll start to notice that there's going to be quite a variation among your different pay periods in how much is available. And that's completely normal to even have alternating pay periods that have a surplus followed by a deficit. If there's one pay period that tends to be a lot more bill heavy than the other ones, all of those patterns are typical inside of a budget. Okay, so the first one here we have on the 6th, this giving for 50. And so as we fill out the budget, any bill is very easy to budget for, actually, because now that we have these calendar format, we're simply looking for every pay period that includes the 6th of the month. And then for savings, let's see, we've got 50 to emergency fund. Does this HSA come out pre-tax part of your paycheck?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'll leave that out because what we're looking at here is all the post-tax, post-deductions. But the transfer to saving to your emergency fund, we will put in. So we'll copy that onto every pay period. And then, okay, so per pay period for mortgage. And then I'll budget once a month on the 1st for $100 towards just maintenance in general, maintenance, repairs, replacing in general. So one of the first things I like to look at over here is to see how much of your take-home pay is going to housing. And so you're sitting at a great spot right there, because what I look at is for housing to be under a third of your take-home pay. So under that 33% mark, and you're down at 21%. So that's great. And then we'll move to utilities. So we have the 11th, the 17th, 24th, and 9th and 2nd. And so you're all, oh, good. You have fixed billing for all of them, which is great. Much easier to budget for things like that than to have the seasonality of like, well, my electric bill could be $95 or $300.
Yeah.
45 and 267. Okay, so I'm just gonna, because of your pay schedule, nice and even, I'm just gonna copy and paste a whole month together all the way across. So even, as we look at these numbers, even with your housing and utilities added together, you're still sitting at under 33% of those two things combined, which we look for that to be in the housing alone. So that's perfect. You're sitting at right at a good spot. And the reason I look at that is not necessarily that it means that everything's going to be beautiful in the rest of the budget, but when I see housing being like 35-40% of take home pay, it generally ends up being a budget where we don't have a lot of options on how to reallocate the way we spend because the housing is that locked in, unchangeable number. And so a lot of times I can tell right away as I build the budget, ooh, okay, if this is tight, the only thing I can really suggest is to increase income. But if we have a tight budget where the housing is a lower percent of take home pay, it usually means we can make the budget feel a lot better by changing spending and not having to go out and increase income. So that's what I'm noticing from yours, even as we're just in the beginning of building it. Okay, so groceries, is it $125 per week or
Every other
2 weeks?
every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks. Okay. So I'll do this, but we will every Monday or every other Monday is
Yeah,
we.
that's fine.
Okay. Okay. And then restaurants, coffee shops, and work lunches, because you have a twice a month schedule, what I usually do is do 2 weeks plus a little bit more because the pay period can be 14 days, but it can be all the way up to like 17, 18, depending on if you get paid a little bit early because of a weekend payday. And then the next one is not paid early. It can end up being just enough longer than 2 weeks that we start to feel stretched a little bit. So what that would look like is like instead of putting 200 for restaurants, I would put 220 for
Okay.
the pay period. And then same thing, like I would do 50 for coffee shops and probably 60 for those. So it's basically just doubling it plus a little bit more. And then I'll
Okay.
do that all the way across. And what that does is it works out so that, instead of having exactly 4 weeks worth of food budgeted for a month, it's like 4.5 weeks, which matches how long a month is a little bit better anyways.
Okay.
Now, food, I look at being 20% or less of take home pay, and you're at 14. So again, green check mark for your categories and your spending.
Okay.
Okay, gas, we budget same way as food. So we'll do 40 every other week, so once a pay period. And then, okay, so your oil changes, you prepaid 3 of them already. Okay, so that's great.
So I won't have any for one. Yeah.
Paid through 6/26 there. And then quarterly. So September 1st, you want to set aside $300 towards car repairs.
Yeah. I was thinking I don't generally don't have a lot. So I was thinking every quarter we'll plan on that. I guess it doesn't need to be once a quarter as much as
Mhm.
maybe building up that much over a quarter.
Yeah. So what I can do, I'm going to highlight this. I use purple for sinking funds, just things that we want
Okay.
to set money aside. So what I'm going to do is highlight it, fill the rest of the budget out, and then decide, does it work better with your numbers to set it as
Okay.
once a quarter or once a month? And I'm actually going to
Okay.
highlight the same thing for the home repairs. So what you can do with things
Okay.
is that you can, if you need to spend it, then obviously it's budgeted for that. It's great, spend it. But then also there's probably gonna be months where you need less than 100 and then months where you need more than 100. So that's the ideal situation for something like a sinking fund where we say, hey, maybe in August you have that 100 budgeted and you only spend 30 on replacing a water filter or whatever. Put the 70
Right.
aside because there's also going to be months where you budget 100 and you need more than 100 to take care of your stuff. So I will highlight the car repairs and then we'll come back to it to decide if 100 a month or 300 a quarter fits better.
Okay.
Okay, car insurance. Do you have, did that include home or do you have young drivers?
I have 2 young drivers.
Okay. And as long as when that's the case, then this is the right number that I would expect to see.
Yeah.
It's just it's just the nature of having young drivers, unfortunately.
I know.
Unfortunately, they're so expensive.
Dang it.
I used to work at a State Farm agent's office,
Oh,
and you would think it was like a counseling session of like grief or something when someone would come in where they're like, my car insurance has been like $105 a month for years and years and years, and now I add
Yeah.
one person and it's 600. And it's like, well, yeah, that one person is 16 years old.
right. Well, you can see there's no car payments because cars
Yes.
are old.
That's good. And that lowers your insurance. Yeah. That's another thing too, is people are like, oh, I'm going to get my teen a brand new car because that's safer. And it's like, well, the newer the car, the higher the insurance. And you put a new car with a new driver, and that's a recipe
Right.
for a disaster in a car insurance company's eyes. So yeah, much better to stick the teens on an old car.
Yeah.
All right. So license and taxes. So this on September 30th, you have a 94.
Yep. And then I just put if I decide like, oh, I want to do more than a year, I put those there for me.
Okay. So I'll put the 94 on September 30th. And then the only thing we need to include is life insurance down in this category. Okay. And then quarterly here. Right. So I'll just copy and paste this on the first of every month. And the other thing you can do in the future, we don't need to do this now, but because it's broken down this way, if you find yourself more frequently spending money in these kind of, miscellaneous categories, you could also always split that amount in half and put it on every pay period so that you have something budgeted in that category every pay period, as opposed to, oh, this is the half of the month where I can spend in that category and this is nothing. So it works either way, obviously. But like, for example, in the supplies, toys, random stuff, if you find that 25 a pay period better matches your spending habits, you can switch it to that as well. Okay, every other month. So for adult clothing, would you like that to be budgeted like in mid to late July or more like mid to late August?
Mid to late July.
Okay. So I'll do
Yeah.
that, and then I will skip August and put it again on September.
Yep.
And then quarterly toiletries. Okay, so this is monthly 15. This is bi-weekly. Oops. Okay. All right, so now we're down into the pets category. So we've got, let's just call it odd months, odd months, annually August, and monthly. Okay, and then last one in the pets is, okay, so the range of 20 to 70, do you expect it to be more like the 70, or is it just
Yeah. It probably more than 70. It depends how many dogs I take. So I just want to
Okay.
assume I'll take all of them.
Yep. And it's so much easier to like with expenses, it's so much easier to just aim high. And then if you end up, not taking one of the dogs, then all you did was create a little extra margin in your budget. Okay, so I'll do that. All right, so we have subscriptions, events, and holidays, and then debt, and then those are the last categories of the budget. So we are almost done.
Right.
I'll put this one. Right, date night, weekly. So I'll do 150. So you can see as we're filling it out that even though like your income was a very set pattern of like the same income across each one, the amounts left in each pay period are actually quite different. And so that's something that a monthly budget doesn't really highlight for us is how distinct each pay period can be. Because as much as we want to assume, oh, by and large, each month is pretty much the same in both our income and both our expenses, even these little random things where like, okay, this bill is paid every other month and this bill is paid quarterly, but it lands in a month where we also have the every other month. Like those things are all knowable pieces of information, but when we leave them out of the budget, it can really mess with what we thought would happen with our money versus what actually ends up happening with our money.
Yeah. It's really interesting to see it this way.
Yes. And I think the best way to describe it, honestly, is a calendar of money. Like it's just, I'm not doing anything, it's like I don't have any grand secret or like I'm revealing like, oh, this really complex way of running money and only I can figure this out or whatever. It's simply like putting a heavier emphasis on the timing of when things are going to happen versus a budget that's a month that just summarizes everything together in one place, which ends up leaving out, do I actually have the income available when those expenses come due?
Great.
Okay, so birthday, Christmas, and vacation would be those perfect ones for those sinking funds, which it looks like you already have some sort of organization like that. Is that what you do already?
Try.
With money inside, try. Yeah. Okay, so these are goal amounts. Is your goal like for birthdays, 50 a pay period, 100 a pay period for Christmas, and 50 a pay period for vacation?
Oh,
Or a month?
let's try per pay period. Actually, per pay period, probably.
Okay. Do you want to leave those blank until we fill out the debt payments and then we can look at how much is available in each one? Okay. So I highlighted them so we can come back to that.
I'm willing to skimp on those people if I need to.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. You're like, who doesn't get a present this year?
It's a different year. It's a different year,
There
kids.
you go. And that's good. Doing this also benefits them, just like getting gifts, right? Okay, so these three columns in your worksheet match these three columns in the budget. So we can just copy and paste and pull those over. So it will sum up for you what your balance is, and then we have these by due date. So what I'll do is for now, we just plan for minimum payments, and then we'll go back in and say, do we have room to do more than that? Or do we want to target a different goal like the emergency fund first?
Okay.
Okay, so fourth, actually, just fill out 1 month, copy and paste it because of your schedule. Yep, so you have a much heavier 1st through 15th than 15th through 30th. So we'll do this and then this. So again, this pattern is normal. So if you notice there across the top that you have a positive followed by a negative, what we look for in that case, because that can sometimes be alarming when people see a negative, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm spending more than I make. You're not. That's possible. If everyone was negative, obviously, then that would be the case. What I look at when I see a few negatives is I look at this number to actually determine, are we spending more than we make or not? Because this is summing up all 6 of the amount left. So you're not spending more than you make. It's just the nature of the rhythm of your income relating, or interacting with the rhythm of your expenses. And that sometimes we have a surplus and sometimes it switches and we have a deficit. On average, we have $357 extra per pay period, even though we have some pay periods that have a lot of extra and some pay periods that actually have a deficit. So all of those pieces of information can just help us to be not alarmist about seeing those pay periods that have deficits, because once we take all of these data points into account, it's less problematic than it might initially appear with those negatives. So with that in mind, a couple of things, like right away, one thing we could do is that this repairs and maintenance, like that's totally in your control to decide how much it is and when it is. So all I'm going to do is move that over to the pay periods that have a surplus. So you want to do that with anything that we can do it with, because that will, just even out your pay periods. So like with car repairs, in the short term, just looking at this number of 357 per pay period available, we would probably want to budget a little bit less than 100 a month towards car repairs, simply because if we take the extra that you have available and we start divvying it up in too many directions with the savings account, we're going to be left with a very small pocket of money for your bigger goals, like your emergency fund and your debt payment.
Right.
But it's not a bad idea to do that. So I would say like even 50 to 75 a month, anything that you can do is still going to help you in the event of a car repair.
Okay. I'm fine with 50.
Okay. I'm going to start with 50 a month then, and I'll put it on those pay periods that have a positive. And then let's go down here. So same with this, like the clothing, the miscellaneous spend, we can just move it over into the other half of the month, and it's helping to offset those negatives. And it doesn't really, we don't change how much we spend. We just change when we're going to spend it.
Okay.
Yep. With that in mind, birthday, Christmas, and vacation. So do you have a specific vacation plan? Like, are you on a timeline of any sort, or is that more of a general pot of money?
Just general. Yeah.
Okay. So then out of these, the two that kind of have a due date, so to speak, would be birthdays and Christmas. So with Christmas, we are 6 months out. So we like in this part of the year in July, we kind of want to reverse engineer how much do I want by Christmas and how much do I need to set aside between now and then. And then moving forward, starting like January of 2026, you could basically put that amount, you could cut that amount in half and put that aside every month, and you would have the same amount by Christmas of the following year. So 6 months away, how much do you want to put aside monthly?
Do 200 a month.
Okay. Okay. And then birthdays.
So I guess I didn't think about this. I have 4, 5, almost, I have like 6 birthdays that are in March and April. So
Okay.
really, right now I could do like, I'm just thinking I could do maybe less until like, I don't know, Christmas or something.
Because what you could do, yeah. So this 200 on Christmas, again, is a doubled up amount because we're 6 months away. So in January, that would drop down from 200 a month to 100 a month. And starting in January, you could start putting at least 100 a month, if not more, towards those birthdays in March and April.
Okay.
So I'll put start 100 in January there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've got what we want or what we need from now through mid-October. So what I do at this point is I make a copy of the budget because I like to be able to see like an original, this is basically a snapshot of what has been happening. So as we want to then discuss making any changes to income or spending and or targeting your goals, it's nice to see a side by side because it helps to see, okay, if I have to make changes like decreasing my expenses temporarily in order to achieve my goals, what kind of difference does that actually make in the budget? So that's why I duplicate those so that we can, as we make changes, we don't lose what it originally looked like and we can see a true difference. So with that in mind, a couple of things that I do right away. So the first thing we would want to talk about is before we target your goals, is there anything in light of what we see with how much is available each pay period? Is there anything that you want to decrease spending on?
So down in the entertainment
Hmm.
section.
Do not.
We go to the movies like at least once a week, at
Okay.
least.
Hmm.
And we don't need to do that. There's enough stuff to watch. So we could change, like remove, I guess, the one that has the 1st to the 15th, essentially, that one. We could take that one
Okay.
out and then maybe reduce entertainment to 50 and then move that to
Okay.
the other pay periods.
I'm going to do 75. And here's why.
Okay.
Because taking the movies out and cutting the entertainment in half at the same time might be an unrealistic change in the short term.
Okay.
It might be sustainable in the long term. I'm going to do 75 and I am going to move it over simply because I would rather do that. And then maybe, maybe in August, September, you're like, hey, 50 is actually enough to stretch us and allow us to do something fun. Then we could change it. But we don't want to do it in one category. I shy away from making too many changes too fast simply because
Okay.
I want to err more on the side of sustainable than extreme. So
Okay.
I love that those were what you identified, but gonna I'm gonna be the anti-budgeter that bumps it up a little bit.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, yes. And I think that is perfect. And honestly, like another thing that I like about this is being able to see this. Like it can feel like a lot, but you're spending 7% of your take home pay in this entire subscription and fund category, right? So it's really not one of the main weights on your budget overall.
Okay.
So just those two changes brought us from an average of 230 a pay period to 270 a pay period, which is no small thing when you repeat it over and over across the pay periods. The other thing we can do is switch this to a monthly amount instead of a pay period simply because we
Oh,
have those deficits.
okay.
So we've gotten rid of every negative except this one, which probably just means if we scroll down that there are like quarterly, like we've
Oh,
got a
car
quarterly, so we can
insurance.
move that.
It's big.
So we can move the toiletries and cosmetics quarterly
Yeah.
over here. And then your annual vet bill that's what's creating the deficit there, which is okay. It's okay because you
Yeah.
have enough here to cover that. So
Right.
y- let me see.
Just save some from the prior pay period.
Yep. Just trying to see if I can move anything else before I do that. Yep. Okay. So we'll take this and we'll move it over here. And then we get rid of every deficit. So that's one of my first goals when we're adjusting the budget is I call it seesawing the budget. But basically, can we reduce anything or can we move anything in order to eliminate the negatives? And we were able to do that fully with yours so that we have a surplus now on every pay period. If we can't do that, or if you have pay periods moving forward after October 14th, where you just can't, finagle it enough to eliminate those deficits, we do have a spot specifically in the budget called rollover for next pay period. And the whole intention of this is to simply set money aside from one pay period to use it in another pay period. So if that were to happen, for example, like here, you have a lot of money available in this pay period and a lot less in this one. If you needed like $100 more in this pay period, all we would do is put 100 right here in this rollover, which kind of earmarks it. It reduces how much is available by 100. And then I would put matching amount in this checking account balance line to say, if I don't spend $100 out of the October or out of the August 15th pay period, that means at minimum, my checking account balance would be $100 on the 31st, in addition to all my new income. And that made $100 extra dollars available in a pay period that I needed it without actually earning anything more than I already
Yeah.
am.
Okay.
So that's how it would happen if you need that in the future. But what we have here is I would look for, I have these target amounts that I call the budget buffer. And what that is in this amount left row, I look for, based on like family size and age, how much do I want to not budget for going specifically towards any goals because I want to use it for those spontaneous little things that pop up that are very small, but they tend to derail the budget if they happen too often. So for you,
Right.
just looking at like expenses and income and those things, I think if we have like 120-ish per pay period unallocated, which would be like $60 per week of random spending
Okay.
or overspending, that kind of gives you enough margin to absorb those little things. So for example, what that would mean is that it gives you the flexibility that if your groceries ends up being $20 higher than what you budgeted in a random pay period, you don't have to completely rearrange your whole budget. It can just be absorbed into that buffer.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
So, looking at your goals, I would say the very first goal for you would be emergency fund because even though we have debt with high interest, what actually keeps us into debt is not the existing debt that we already have, it's the lack of a savings account in the first place. So, if we think about it as don't think about the emergency fund as being something that delays your debt payoff, think about it as the first step in debt payoff. Because what it does is ensure that once you start targeting your debt, you don't have to go back into debt while you're paying off debt for anything that comes up. And that's often what happens is that people get stuck in this vicious cycle of what bothers them more is the debt than the lack of savings. So they'll target the debt. But if they do that without having a savings account, then what happens is the debt starts to come down. And as soon as an unexpected expense pops up, the debt comes back up because we don't have any other option for how to pay for it. So
Okay.
with that in mind, that this emergency fund here is going to be that first goal, but let's identify how much we want that to be. So what I'm going to do is highlight the things we would continue to pay even in the event of a job loss, essentially. That's how we filter out what's necessary versus unnecessary.
Okay.
So housing, obviously, utilities, and then I'll highlight food, including work lunches, but not the restaurants and coffee shops, gas for the car,
You can take
and
work
car
lunches.
insurance. What?
I- You can take out the work lunches. Yeah.
And then, yeah, car insurance, life insurance. We'll just do this one as a general, like kids' supplies. And then and then all minimum payments on debt. Okay, so actually, 3,885 is a month of necessary expenses. So it's much different than a month of typical spending, and it's much different than a month of income. But it is a good gauge. Like I would say 4,000. Like just round that to a solid 4,000. That would be a 1 month emergency fund for you because it would cover 1 month of necessary expenses. Now, for a full
Okay.
emergency fund, we want to multiply that by between 3 and 6.
Mm.
What I would say, just for round numbers sake, I would say that like a 4,000 emergency fund is a starter emergency fund that we want to hit before we start targeting debt. And then after
Okay.
paid off high interest debt, some anywhere between like 15 and 20,000 would be a full emergency fund for you based on numbers. And actually 15 would probably be adequate because with the emergency fund that we're calculating right now, we have to include minimum payments on debt as part of those necessary expenses. But if we're looking at when those are gone, how much of necessary expenses do I have? We can take those out, and 3,000 is more like a month of necessary expenses. So I would say 4 would be your starter emergency fund amount, and 15 would be your full.
Okay.
So I'm going to write that down up here. Start emergency fund 4,000 full. And those amounts are flexible in terms of if your expenses change, then we want to recalculate what that looks like. This is a very fluid, as time goes on, those amounts are going to change in either direction. So it could be like if you when your teens graduate and start covering their own expenses, your car insurance is going to drop back down. Like that could be another thing that changes. So for example, in ours, we had one amount for our emergency fund for a long time. And then when we just bought our house, our mortgage is much larger than our previous rent was. So our current emergency fund became less than 3 months of expenses when it had been 3 months of expenses. So we're currently beefing up our emergency fund to get it back to 3 months of our new expenses. So that amount can flux in terms of how much it covers. Okay, so with those in mind and the fact that you already have $1,600 that you would consider an emergency fund, we only need to add $2,400 to your emergency fund to hit that first goal, and then refocus. Instead of putting extra money to the emergency fund, anything that had been going to the emergency fund from that point forward would go to debt payments.
Okay.
So I'll look at how I find how much you can put into the emergency fund each pay period is that if we want to have about $120 left over available on every pay period, I'm simply looking at what would the difference be between the current amount left and 120. So that would
Okay.
be this, and then a lot here, and then nothing there, and then 250 there, and 240 there. So again, very, very normal for every pay period to be very different.
Yeah.
And that's usually, you just made a surprised face. That's very typical and often very surprising for people. Like, a lot of times they'll make a budget and they'll basically be like, this is my general budget and this is what I can do every month. So they might write down, I can put 400 into savings every month. But as soon as we map it out this way, and like, we didn't include anything wild, we just included
Right.
normal bills when they were due. And it creates quite a variation between having nothing available this pay period all the way up to $670 available in this pay period. And it's simply a function of the reason this is happening, where this one has a lot more than the others, is that you have several bills that you pay every other month. They fall in these odd months. And so August is an even month. And so it has more available than the other ones do.
Yeah. Great.
So that's already that would be at almost 3,000 by the end of September, which is amazing.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, that would be super great. So if the pattern holds, then by the end of the year, you will, and it would probably happen before the end of the year, you would have a $4,000 emergency fund. And at that point, what I recommend then is to stop adding to the emergency fund and take anything that had been going there and put it towards debt.
Okay.
So the last thing I want to do, even though we're not going to plan for money going to debt in the next 6 pay periods, I do want to put them in order and just identify what the best order would be. So what I look at is the 2 main pieces of information that decide what order we should pay off the debt are the balance and the interest rate. Because all of yours have very similar interest rates, paying them off from smallest to largest is going to be the best method. Because first of all, not only is your store card number 1 is your lowest balance, it's also your highest interest rate. And so if you do the debt avalanche method or the debt snowball method, either way, this one's going to be first. And then moving down, when 2 debts are very similar in balance, then I choose whichever is the higher interest rate. So if these were flipped, where this one that's slightly higher had a much higher interest rate, I would pay that one off first. But because your next smallest one also has a higher interest rate one than the one that's similar to it, then the personal line is just second, store card third. So yeah, you're going to be right down the line of, we don't have to rearrange them. They'll be smallest balance to largest. Let's see. Yeah, because these will most likely, the 0% interest rates will most likely expire as you're paying them off, just based on how your rate of savings or your rate of your goals. So even though these are currently 0% interest, by the time you're working through your debt snowball, that interest rate is going to kick back in. And so this is where they would fall in the order. If for any reason let's say you pay off these 2 and this store card number 2 is still at 0% interest, instead of focusing on that one, try to pay down cards that are actively charging you interest first. And a lot of times people do it backwards, where they're like, oh, I want to pay down the 0% interest before the interest rate kicks back in. What actually takes the most advantage of that 0% interest is to pay down cards that are actively charging you interest while the other ones are on the 0%.
Okay.
And then I usually highlight these numbers, dark green for high interest debt and light green for low interest, but we have all high interest in your case. All dark green. So that would be the order of debts. Now, the reason the debt snowball works so well is that as soon as you pay off even just the first debt, you will free up $170 a month so that whatever you had been paying monthly
Mm.
towards that store card one, you can add that amount plus the minimum payment from store card one to the minimum payment of the personal line. And so that
Mm.
second one will get paid off way faster than the first one did. And so if you apply that same principle 3 or 4 debts down the road, the speed at which you're going to be able to pay off the last 3 debts will be like lightning fast compared to the speed of the first 3. So all that to say, that's my pep talk. If people are like, oh, this is going to take a long time, it's actually not. Like, that first one is by far the hardest one to get paid off. But as soon as you get that paid off, the speed that you're paying off the second one, you'll be like, oh my gosh, I have like hundreds a month to put towards this next debt because you're
Right.
pulling it from all these different places. So it will go slow at first, but it will speed up much quicker than you probably are used to, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, just hearing you like say it out like that, like in my head, I'm like,
Mhm.
obviously. But
Yep.
then something about hearing it is like exciting
Yep.
and yeah, makes it more
Yep.
real or I don't know. But
Yeah,
anyways.
because what's so normal to happen is that we take how much we have available right in this current moment, and we imagine that that's like locked in, that that's always what it's going to be, right? That like, oh my goodness, last month I had $160 to put towards my savings. If I can only do $160 every month, I'm never going to be able to chip away at this. But that's not
Yeah.
actually how it works. And so as soon as we get that first one, if you have $160 a month to put towards your goals, as soon as the first one is paid off, the amount left doubles because we add
Yeah.
minimum payment to it. So we don't have to, the margin that we have currently is not going to always be the margin that we have.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool.
So last thing I like to cover is how do we actually use this? Like when that first pay period starts, what do we actually do? So
Mm.
this functions completely as a plan for your money to map out in advance what you would like to do. But it also functions as a tracker to pay attention to, compared to what I thought would happen, what actually ends up happening. So a couple of things. I use color coding, filling in the buckets to signal to myself where I'm at in the pay periods. So anything that is taken directly out of my checking account, the colors I use are blue and orange. They can literally be any color to you as long as you know what they mean. Blue to me
Mm.
is my like complete paid color, like that has come out of the checking account in the amount that I
Mm.
expected. And so as soon as that happens, I fill it in. I use this color. And so then that to me is like, okay, I don't have to pay attention to that expense in the column anymore because it's done and paid for. If there's
Okay.
anything that is charged to a credit card, I use orange as a pending color, which to me is like I've been charged for it, but I have not actually paid for it out of my
Good.
checking. So that can apply to credit card charges, but it can also apply to like you wrote a check for something and they haven't deposited it yet. So
Mm.
when I do that, I just last night I wrote a check to the pool for my kid's birthday party. I turned that cell orange, and that's just my visual reminder like, hey, you sent this money out into the world, but it hasn't actually been withdrawn from your account
Okay.
yet. And it's just my way of not, it's easy to forget those things, right? And then somebody
Right.
deposits something or they pull it and then you're like, "Oh my gosh, I forgot that I sent that to someone." So I use that orange as like a middle of the road, like something has happened with this charge, but I haven't paid it yet. And then once I
Okay.
pay it, I change it from orange to blue and that's my okay, now I'm done with it.
Okay.
As things change in the pay period or come up, the whole goal of this amount left is to be able to use it. So if something comes up, let's say, the kids have a school fundraiser or whatever, and you give $15. The beauty of having that buffer, that extra amount left, is those small incidental things can simply be added to the budget, even if it's during the pay period. We don't have to feel like we have to completely rearrange everything in order to add them in.
Okay.
Any spending. So I call them trackers down at the bottom. These are for categories where we budget one full amount, but then we spend it in multiple transactions throughout the pay period. And those are often the hardest ones to pay attention to and stay on
Mhm.
track with. So what I've created here is these like basically a mini budget that if we say, okay, for groceries, I'm doing 125 a pay period. you can record the store and the amount. And then if you do that, like if you say Aldi 102, then this will let you know, okay, you have still inside the plan, inside the budget. You could go to the store again a week later and buy $23 worth of milk and produce to stock up, and that's still going to be on plan. And
Okay.
then just highlight these at the end of the pay period and clear them out and restart the next pay period.
Okay.
They can also be used for other things. This one here, especially, can easily be copied and pasted if you want to use it for additional categories besides what I put here. But
Okay.
these are some of the most helpful, like, how do I stay in tune with my budget once the pay period starts, as opposed to looking at it before the pay period starts?
Okay. Yeah. That's perfect.
Do you have any questions about either how I set it up or how I use it once the pay period begins?
No. So everything essentially that isn't through a pay period, then those things are things that didn't happen yet, hit the account, and then do you just leave them there or do you put them into the next column over so that when they do come, like if they're running, I don't know,
Mhm.
like if a check didn't clear, for
Yes. Yes.
example.
So, for example, if you have, let's see, I think you had a bill that was like right at the end of a pay. Yeah. So this credit card too on the 14th. I
Hmm.
sometimes, depending on where the 14th falls, it might actually withdraw on the 15th. So
Right.
when that happens, I take it out of the pay period that's ending and put it into the pay period that's beginning. So for example, if I delete this out and put 200 here, 200 here instead, what that means
Mhm.
is I've also increased how much is left in this pay period to the point that I could roll over. I have the 200 planned, but it didn't actually get spent, which means 200 would be in my checking account balance that's unallocated at the start of this pay period. And by doing that, I've basically gotten myself back to baseline. I now have the buffer amount left that I had originally had because I've moved things over. And that can happen for multiple things. So you could move that over. Let's say that moved over, and then you also, maybe something happened on a weekend. So you only went on one of your dates, this one, and you're going to do an extra one in this pay period. You can do that with multiple transactions. And then once you've adjusted all the transactions to move over to the next pay period, then we could just say, okay, well, now I have 300 left over here. And so 300 is going into the next pay period. And I've balanced myself back out.
Okay. Okay. And so to start it for July 15th, I should
Mhm.
be adding in what I currently have in my bank account as
Right.
of July 15th.
As of July 15th. So the ideal, what you would want, let me get this back to where it was before. There we go. Okay. So what you would want to do on like basically the night of July 14th or on the 15th when you just subtract your paycheck out is
Right.
if you say, okay, there was $450 in there on July 14th, which means that I have 450 and all my new income for the pay period. You can
Okay.
decide a couple things. You can decide if you want to use that money because the checking account is more like a waiting room for our money than it is like a savings account. We don't want to let money just build up and sit there. There's so many other
Mhm.
things we could do with it.
Okay.
So you can, but one thing that's a good thing to do is to choose a nice round even number that's your false zero in your checking account. So if you decide, okay, 300 is my zero and I'm not going to touch 300, it's just so that, as little, if we have things that come out earlier or later than what we thought they would, that we're not going into the red simply because of that. And then what you can do is if you decide, let's say you have 450 in your checking account on July 14th, if you decide 300 is my false zero that I'm not going to touch, I'm not going to plan for it to go anywhere, what we would actually put in this checking account balance would be 150.
Okay.
So what that says is I'm willing to use $150 out of what is available and I don't want to touch the 300. And basically the only reason I say make it be a nice round even number is so that you can just quickly do the mental math by looking at it.
Right.
And then what you could do is in this pay period, you could put like 150 into your emergency fund and you're still left with that buffer,
Okay.
that target amount. So that's up to you and you can play around with it and decide
Mm.
what number makes you feel comfortable with that false zero and then how much of that money do you want to go ahead and use towards your goals. The nice
Okay.
thing about starting out budgeting with this method where your goal is the emergency fund is that as a fail safe, if you put too much in the emergency fund, you can pull it back out. If we overshoot what we can do with our goals. We can't do that once we're targeting our debt payments. If we make an extra debt payment, we can't reverse it. And so
Right.
that's one of the other reasons that first having a healthy emergency fund before we target debt is the proper order to do things. Because in that situation, we would then use part of the emergency fund to cover something that we forgot or that we went over or that happened that we didn't know
Yeah.
about when we made that debt payment.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. If you have any questions, I feel like every coaching call is like a fire hose of numbers and information from me. Once you start using it, I'm sure questions will come up. So please just email me once you actually start using it. If you hit July 15th and you're like, I don't think I set this up right with my checking account balance or whatever, just send me an email. I also can get back into the file if I need to and help
Yeah.
you out with any like, okay, if you put this number here, it would work better or whatever. So please don't feel like as I sign off from this call that I'm just like releasing you with no help or support or whatever.
No, I'm excited. I
Good.
am genuinely excited. And I mean, as an accountant, I
Mhm.
I love numbers. I get off
Yep.
on making them balance. Like,
Yep. It's a
so to
game.
see it,
It's enjoyable.
yeah, to see it laid out like this it's like home. It makes me comfortable
Good.
and I feel confident that I can actually do it. So thank you
Yep.
so much for
Yeah, you're
walking
very welcome.
through
And I think
everything.
a big part of that, I mean, I know I'm also a spreadsheet. Like I put everything in my life into a spreadsheet. But I do think even for people who aren't spreadsheet, I think one of the big changes compared to budgeting methods that you've tried in the past is that when we only can see like a 30-day window at a time,
Um,
it makes us feel secure about the next 30 days, but it still makes us feel like, well, the month after that is this big black hole of, am I going to be able to cover everything in that month? Or what if something goes wrong? So having
Right.
a little bit more of a timeline that we can see with specific dates and specific numbers can just give us calm of like, oh, like all the way from now to October 15th, which feels a lot farther away, I have a secure and
Right.
stable plan for my money.
Yeah, no, I love seeing it laid out like this. And so I guess the beginning of October, then I just create a
There's
new
blank
one and
Yep, so
hold up.
there's blank ones at the bottom. You
Okay.
can't duplicate the existing one, obviously, but I think there is something, especially for the first time, there is something to starting blank and having it side by side with what you just finished and what you're starting. Because the
Yeah.
process of doing exactly what I just did, I think just makes you really in tune with what it's set up and how you want to do it. After that, you can duplicate and make copies of it instead. But I do think just that first time, taking a little bit of time to be the one to fill it out exactly the way I did makes you really
Yeah.
feel like, okay, I can take control of this.
No, even just filling out the sheet for you, I mean, makes you more aware,
Yep.
obviously,
Yep.
and think about it. And so, no, it was all
Yeah.
such a good exercise. So,
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for doing this, Lauree.
all right.